So we are in Numbers, the 13th chapter, and we're going to be dealing with verse 1 through chapter 15, verse 41. Now, the primary context of this Parsha is the scouts being sent into the promised land. Now, we have spoken ad nauseum about the mission of the spies, how God instructs Moses to send the 12 leaders from each tribe, the head of their tribe, basically a scout, to scout the land of Israel. The land of Israel. And their mission was to assess the land's fertility and strength, its inhabitants, basically a force recon, to go out to see what was out there, look at the fortifications of its cities, etc. Next, just kind of keep that as point one. And the next one, then we're going to come back and examine each section. I'm sorry, I'm getting hiccups. Chapter 13, verse 1 through 20 is where that is. Now, chapter 13, verse 21 to 33, and the hiccups are causing me. Whew. The next is the spies report that comes up in 21 through 33. After 40 days, the spies return with produce from the land, huge grapes, clusters of grapes. It's just fruitful beyond anybody's imagination, which they already knew that. They already knew that they were going to have to displace those who would not embrace the Sheva Mitzvot and live peaceably amongst the Israelites. The Israelites were going to be commanded to destroy some of these people groups. Joshua Caleb came back, the two spies, expressing absolute confidence in God's promise and urged them to immediately do a conquest. But the problem, point 3, is in Numbers 14, 1 through 10, the people rebel. They just are influenced by the 10 spies, which I find it interesting that the vast majority of people can be motivated by panic and the sky's falling. And I kind of put that to where even we are today, is like we're still influenced by campaigns of negativism that happens and lies that our media is so full of that now. And we could have a good talk about what motivates us as humans to go to a negative report rather than a positive one. Now, we have God's response. God expresses frustration or anger for the lack of people's faith, their emunah, and threatens to destroy them. Now, Moses intercedes, pleading for forgiveness. God agrees to spare the people, and he said he would not allow those who were negative or did not want to go to enter into the land. So Joshua and Caleb obviously end up being the only two people that go. Next is the defeat of Hamorah. The Israelites attempt to enter the land despite God's decree and are defeated by the Amalekites and Canaanites. This is Numbers 14, 39 through 45. Now, here we can talk about a misguided zeal. The Ramchal, matter of fact, in Path of the Just, talks about misguided zeal and what that can do for you. That's another good subject we could talk about. Next is the additional laws. There were additional laws that were provided, including various laws and commandments, regulations about meal and drink offerings to accompany a gift to God. A portion of challah dough would be taken apart as an atonement for an unintentional sins by the community or the individual. This is found in Numbers 15, 1 through 31. Next is, it deals with the man who was found violating the Sabbath. Now, according to my understanding, and Rabbi Avner could correct that, this is actually the only recorded incidents in which someone was punished severely because of this infraction. We can talk about what this man did and how he attempted to do this in such a brash way. We'll talk about that. And last would be the commandment of tzitzit. This is what the Jewish males wear. It's the fringes upon the corners of the garments, and these fringes serve as a virtual reminder to observe God's commandments and to basically live a holy life. It was a constant reminder on their apparel that remind them of the holiness of God and the Torah itself. So it teaches, this Parsha teaches a very beautiful lesson of faith and trust in God and the consequences of rebellion and fear. And it emphasizes, most importantly, the importance of God's commandments and how important it is for us to cling to the commandments. Now, let's go back over the verses. We're going to go back at the top. And who would like to be the first to read? Let me go to Numbers 13. Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Send agents to scout out the land of Canaan, which I am given to the Israelites. Send one participant from each of the ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them." So Moses commanded and sent them out to the wilderness of Paran, all of them being men of consequences. Now, what in the world are we talking about men of consequences here? Let's see. Let's look up some. Paran was, and if you go ahead and look at your commentary, begin to examine the wilderness north, the wilderness bounded on the north by the Palestinians, which are the Philistines, on the west of the wilderness of Etham, onto the south of the desert of Sinai. So it was a large area, and east to the valley of Arabia. The Exodus was thought of this area as probably all that region that is controlled in those 18 or those areas that they were in Paran. Trying to look up that one word. So it seems that the men that were selected were obviously men of great responsibility. So these weren't thugs. These weren't people that would cause problems or stress, but this goes to show you they were also probably reflecting the mindset of their own people at the same time. So let's look at this. It says, thus the names of the tribes of Reuben, Shammua, son of Zachar, the tribe of Simeon, the tribe of Judah was Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the tribe of Issachar is a representative that came from the tribe of Issachar, and Ephraim, Benjamin. Goes through and lists all of these great men. And those are the names of the participants, verse 16, whom Moses sent to scout the land. But Moses changed the names of Hosea to the son of Nun to Joshua. He changes Joshua's name at this time. It says, go up to the Negeb and to the hill country and see what kind of country it is. Are we people who dwell in it strong or weak? For many. What's it like? What's the country like? Is it good to dwell in? The towns they live in open or fortified? Is the soil rich? Basically, Moses was sending them in for an assessment to build their emunah, not to discourage them. And what did they do is they came back with a report that's very bad. Now, any comments you want to make on the mission of the spies? Anything that you wanted to make an observation on or comment? Now would be a time to do it. Mary?
Oh, obviously, they knew, Moses knew there was going to be a problem, which is why he changed Joshua's name, right?
All right.
And also, we know that Caleb went to the grave sites because he knew there was an issue. So why did we not bless the other 10 or do something to make them stronger because they were anticipating a problem?
This is really interesting. Rabbi, do you have any comment on that?
Your question is based on Midrashim. Midrash is not necessarily what really happened, and Midrash doesn't really follow what the text is. So the two of them went to Hebron to That's only midrash, you know. It doesn't mean that they went to the group, okay. And you cannot now you can ask why didn't. In fact, there is one point here. You mentioned the word that they were all distinguished people. They were actually Sanhedrin.
Okay.
Now the law is, and that's the section after that. The Am Yisrael were not punished here as a people, but as individual. Had the Sanhedrin remained faithful, listen to that. Had the whole Sanhedrin remained faithful, like Caleb and Yoshua, if they all were so faithful, and they were really loyal Sanhedrin, and they came back with the bad news, and Am Yisrael would have followed them, Am Yisrael would have been punished as a nation. Since the Sanhedrin was foiled, corrupt, Am Yisrael here are judged as individual, which means in the eyes of the Torah, a nation depends on the Sanhedrin. If a good Sanhedrin form a nation. If the nation is corrupt, then the people are individual, which means to Noahide. You know what? In the eyes of the Torah, a nation is not the one who have an army and flag and hymn and wear a special uniform and sit on a certain land. That's of course very natural definition of a nation. But in the eyes of a Torah, a nation comprises a group, a unit called nation, if they have good Sanhedrin in the sense of, in the case of Noahide, if they have just court.
Right.
Amazing. What in the eyes of Hashem, a Noahide nation, all the 70 nations, each nation is considered a nation, only a qualified nation, only if they follow dinim, number 5 of Noahide law. We say that this is only positive commandment. If they erect court, if they appoint loyal judges, they are then comprised as a nation. Here is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Since the Sanhedrin was corrupt, that actually saved the Am Yisrael, and they were punished only for that generation, individual, but not as a nation. Had the Sanhedrin remained loyal and still corrupt and still coming back with the bad news, this would have been awful. Am Yisrael then would be wiped out and replaced by Moses, as Hashem himself said it. So that's a result. That's why after the story comes the section of they tell you that if the people are they depend on the Sanhedrin. That's actually the section that follows. So that's a lesson. I just wanted to share it with you.
Well, I appreciate that. It helps us to understand that the matrix behind being a nation was a nation that was in and cleaving to Hashem in every aspect of their life, including the Noahide. And I find it interesting in the time of my growing and learning, one of the things that we've come across is when people would say, well, the rabbis have said this and the rabbis have said that. And, you know, what if we find out the rabbis were wrong? And when Mashiach comes, he'll change all of that. And, you know, how is that going to play out? And I say that's the way God intended it. And we all need to concern ourselves with doing what is right for us as a human, as a person. Am I clinging to God? Am I following Hashem's will? And be what do you call it, obsessed with that rather than obsessed with trying to figure out what everybody else is doing. Like, focus on your own walk with Hashem. The interesting thing is, you said these were the judges. They relied on them to make this kind of a decision, and they just lost control of the crowd. And the 10 spies actually discouraged the people. I mean, they were scared out of their mind, or were they insecure with living in the land? Do you think that they were feeling more insecurity because of going into the land, or was it that they weren't ready for it? Like, what was the problem here? And it appears that these wise men of renown went in and unduly influenced the people, not in favor of what God was going to do, but rather the impossibility of getting it done. And that's really a terrible thing. That would be under the people's rebellion. Anybody wants to talk about the people's rebellion before we go on?